Right, guys, welcome back to another lesson. We are looking at lesson 10 today, consumption and paraphernalia and how that influences our identity. That's the dot point here. We know that, again, paraphernalia is referring to any associated products that can be sold during the consumption process of sitcoms. What we're looking at is how that consumption of paraphernalia influences a sense of identity. And that's relating to consumers' sense of identity there. So in a nutshell, there's a few things you can talk about. So one of the main things is obviously how it affects the physical identity aspect of things. If we look at, for example, this photo of Rachel, I know I've talked about it before, but the Rachel haircut was a big thing back when Friends was airing live on TV. People would go into hairdressers, ask for the Rachel. They would know exactly what season they're up to and would give her that exact style of haircut. But paraphernalia is also more than that. It's also wearing apparel, so shirts, mugs we've looked at previously, doormats. Any of this would be considered paraphernalia. And how that, I guess, influences your sense of identity is it really manifests in that physical identity. So if you're wearing a shirt, it's very clear to people in the public as you're passing by that that's part of your physical identity. But it's not necessarily that as well. It can be reflected in your behaviours, your mannerisms. If you incorporate the jokes of certain sitcoms into your everyday conversations, that's definitely imprinting on your identity. If you are, I guess, characterising and replicating certain behaviours, that's also part of the process there too. There are other forms as well. When we look at things like magazines and People magazines, if people are consuming that, keeping up to date with the latest and greatest of their famous sitcom celebrities, and they may be talking about that in their social circles, that's influencing their social identity. If people start to talk, that's influencing their cultural identity because that's part of their language and even their values and belief systems if they go as to far as to adopt similar to the characters that they're watching. It's very interesting. There's also other aspects of paraphernalia. So the Rembrandt song "I'll Be There for You," so the intro to Friends or the intro to The Big Bang Theory. So sales and streams of these singles really increase once the show is aired, and that can again influence your sense of identity. A lot of people play that song at big events in their lives, weddings, funerals, 30ths, whatever it may be. Again, linking that with their identity or their cultural identity. So when people pick those within their micro and meso worlds, you can really see how identifying with that paraphernalia at each level, whether it's micro or meso, is quite impactful. Once we move on as well, we've talked about that Rachel haircut before, but even things like consuming, I don't know if anyone's ever watched the Oscars or the Emmys or anything like that. By watching that and consuming that, this increases people's identity to the popular culture because it's something that they may typically post on their social media page or statuses, or they may send to their friends, and again it becomes part of that social identity therein again. And obviously we've talked about the catchphrases and quick one-liners as well. That can form part of that. So once you've read through that and completed the word bank on there, I would like you to list at least 3 associated paraphernalia relating to sitcoms, and I want you to briefly link how that influences identity. Remembering you can have your physical identity, your social identity, or your cultural identity. One of each here might be a good option if you would like to do so. An example I've put here for physical identity is the Rachel haircut. Again, you can't use that here because that's my example. There it is there in all its glory. But think of certain ones. If you get stuck, ask a friend. If they're stuck, come and ask me. The really important thing in this table though is that once you've identified it, that you justify it. You need to tell me how this influences identity. So you don't just say, oh, it influences their social identity. You need to tell me how. You can't just say it influences their cultural identity. You need to tell me how it influences their cultural identity. So how does it influence their behaviour? How might it influence their beliefs? How might it influence the language that they use, etc. And then lastly, we have a practice peel paragraph again. keeping the HSC in mind. And the question is the following: to what extent has the development of technology influenced the paraphernalia associated with one sitcom or one popular culture that has sitcoms you have studied? Now here I only want you to write one Peel paragraph. So you're not writing a whole essay here, you're not writing an intro, you're not writing a conclusion, you are just writing one Peel paragraph. So to what extent, so we know here that we are making a judgment, that's assessing, that's evaluating, making a value judgment. Has the development of technology influenced paraphernalia in sitcoms? So how has the development of technology influenced the paraphernalia associated with one? So judgment there again. So yes, it has to a large extent, to a small extent, whatever your position is, make that clear as we read that. And then also remember to follow your Peel, make your point, example, explain, link. If you're not sure, check the scaffold out that you all have in your books. If you're still struggling, obviously please come and see me. I'm happy to help you. And that's it for lesson 10. Good night.